what it comes down to is your disease does not define you.
Absolutely. It is a word, not a sentence.
Oh, I love that. It is a word, not a sentence. So, so, so true. Because, when we get that diagnosis, whatever it is, it feels like it eats us, that it becomes who we are when that's not the case.
Welcome to the Building the Noise podcast.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Building the Noise podcast. My name is Matt Teresco, and with me today is an unbelievable patient advocate, but also brand new doctoral. Well, you completed your doctorate dissertation and defense, so PhD coming soon. Shay Webb. Shay, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure the work that you've been putting in at Campbell University has been difficult, but also very important for you. So before we go any further, what I'd love to understand and to give our audience a sense of is, what do you do and why do you do what you do?
Sure. So I'm Shay. I've had type 1 diabetes the last almost 20 years, and I've had rheumatoid arthritis the last approximately 10 years.
Mm,
And that really fueled me to pursue clinical research when I got to undergrad. So ultimately, I'm a clinical researcher by day, but I'm also a patient advocate and I love focusing in on policy. So the best way to describe me is, policy focused scientist or researcher.
that's unbelievable. I mean, we've been doing this research in with our Elevate report for the last 12 years, and to watch the work done and not done ultimately by the nonprofit community on behalf of patients and policy has been difficult to observe. We went from 76% of disease state organizations doing policy work. And then when COVID hit, we dropped to 22%. And now, as of this year, we're up to 46%. So we're getting some ground back. But what in your mind is so important about doing policy advocacy for patients?
It's so important because it touches so many different things. You can't have policy advocacy and just talk about policy. You have to talk about the person, you have to talk about the research, the science that's behind it, and most importantly, the patient voices. Because whatever policy that we advocate for that gets passed or doesn't get passed, there's a patient voice behind it. So
Mm,
having that policy piece in there, it touches everything. You cannot get around anything that you are passionate about without talking about policy.
yeah, and it's you're speaking my language, because when it comes to patient voices, that's what we're all about, is ensuring that patients A know that they have a voice, and B, that we can get them to use it if they feel confident, comfortable, and educated. How do we get more patients to recognize that their voice is vitally important in this world we call healthcare?
We first have to show them how to do it. You
Mm.
can't tell someone how vital their voice is if they don't know how to use their voice in ways that are effective and in the ways that would be vital for them.
Mm.
So, for example, there's a lot of people who, not to say it's not a big thing, but they probably don't understand that they are able to talk to their policymakers. They're able to arrange meetings with them to tell them what their concerns are, what their needs and wants may be. It might not all get addressed, overnight, but
Sure.
this is something that's possible for any of our patients or any of our community members to do. So I think really establishing what it means to use that patient voice before
Yeah.
just like putting the pressure on to go use their patient voice is really important because all
Yeah.
of them have voices. And one thing that I've loved seeing, especially being an advocate, is everyone has so many different personalities and that they have different ways that they advocate. For me,
Yes.
I get adrenaline going to the Hill or going to General Assembly and getting to share the perspective of the state. Some people are not like that. Some people would rather do the research, work in the background, send a letter, and those are
Mm.
really effective ways. You're just not as vocal, but you're
Sure.
still being seen and you're still being heard, but you literally don't have to say anything.
Yeah. And I know that you're co-chair of the Type 1 Diabetes Trends and Needs Working Group for was it the North Carolina Diabetes Advocacy Council?
Yes, the advisory council for the state of North Carolina.
So tell us more about that work and how you learned to share your voice.
Sure. So, with the North Carolina Diabetes Advisory Council, we're all everything diabetes for the state of North Carolina. So, we have different work groups focused on different areas. Mine specifically is type 1, and we're working with a lot of the patient advocacy groups, healthcare providers, endocrinologists, the people who are boots on the ground, working with patients, working with the community to help improve diabetes across the state. And
Mm-hmm.
something that I got into, it was at an early age because when you're diagnosed with diabetes, it's, I don't want to say sink or swim, but sometimes it can be sink or swim. So
Sure.
I was 8 years old when I was diagnosed, and my mom exposed me to a lot of advocacy opportunities. And it all started with Breakthrough T1D, which when I joined, it was JDRF, the Juvenile Diabetes
Yes.
Research Foundation. So going to these different events, being vocal about, okay, what does it feel like to have diabetes at such a young age? And then as I got older, it wasn't just about having diabetes as a youth, it was having diabetes as a Black youth, as a female.
Mm.
And now it's as a young adult Black woman who has it, but still is underrepresented. So the more that I grew in my own disease and began to accept, here are the statistics, here's what it looks like, it gave me fuel to say that this is what I don't want to see and what I want to change. And I've
Sure.
been going along ever since.
Been fighting the fight ever since. Uh, let's go back to when you were diagnosed. You said you were 8 years old. Is that correct?
Yes.
At 8 years old.
Thanksgiving. Unbelievable.
Oh, what were you experiencing at that time? And I understand that you went through some difficulty getting a diagnosis, as so many of us do, unfortunately. But I think, particularly as we think about type 1 diabetes in the African American population, that's something that I had not heard many people talk about. And I believe in our initial conversation, you had laid out that people didn't believe that you could have type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, it's true. One thing I can definitely say is I think I had the most issue with the diagnosis with my rheumatoid. But
Mm,
because I had such an advocate heavy family, especially my
yeah,
mom, and because diabetes ran so rapidly in our family, they were able to catch it really early. So I started showing symptoms like going to the bathroom a lot, drinking a lot
hmm,
of water. I was tired all the time. I was losing weight. And my mom just caught on like, this looks really familiar because to her, it looked like my great grandfather
sure,
was her grandfather. So the plan was to go to the pediatrician, to go to the doctor that week, and to see what was going on. But they didn't want to see me until Thursday. But with diabetes, we know you cannot last that long.
sure.
So she pushed, and they were able to see me that Monday morning because she called on, I think it was like a Sunday afternoon. They could saw me Monday morning. My blood sugar was almost 600. So
Wow.
we had to literally speed to the hospital across town and go to the 10th floor, which was the pediatric floor. And honestly, we if you don't have that understanding or if you don't have that advocacy and that support system,
Yeah.
things can take a really hard turn. And then the other side of that is an issue that we have, especially when youth are diagnosed. The first day, it's like getting information from a fire hose. So you're trying to digest something's wrong, and sometimes we're too young to digest that something's wrong. But your family is also experiencing that transition, like, okay, we have to change gears.
Yeah. Especially with
Because
Thanksgiving 2 days away.
exactly, it was 2 weeks, so it was a little
Oh,
time.
2 weeks. Okay.
Still, it was definitely a
Still.
time. But I think that time that we were there and just getting that information right when you walk in, very overwhelming
Yeah.
because you don't know, you have diabetes, you don't know what type until maybe about mid through the week sometimes. At least it
Mm.
was during that time. So all of that happens. And then I'm discharged, and after, like, the week after, my mom teaches me everything about the disease and what I need to do and how to
Thank you for
control
mom.
it, literally.
Yeah,
The thing is, though, it was the social part that people don't always tell you about. And
sure.
because I had type 1, going back to your point, it was something unbeknownst to me, especially down here. Type 1 was known as type white. So I would go a lot of places and I would be the only black kid, black girl
Yeah,
there with type 1. Or it would be a situation where it's the continuous correction for people to say, okay, I have diabetes. It's like, oh yeah, just, eat less sugar, exercise more. And it's like, no, I don't have that type. I have the other type.
sure.
So because we're in the black community and it's a higher rate of type 2, we're automatically categorized as having type 2.
Mm,
And all I can say is I'm really glad that I wasn't diagnosed when I was older, because that categorization goes up a lot. To say that there have been many times and many misdiagnoses, I should say, where
sure.
people feel that they were aged out and they had type 1, but they were diagnosed with type 2 because they're like, you're too old to have type 1. Or based on your background, quote unquote, you should have type 2. It's not the case. And then they
Hmm.
go years with uncontrolled diabetes because they have the wrong diagnosis.
And the damage that can be done
Oh,
in
yeah.
that weight. I mean, I don't have to tell you, but
It's
South
insane.
Charleston, not Charleston, but Columbia, South Carolina, has the highest rate of diabetic amputation in the country, and a lot of it is due to, again, that I don't want to skip over what you said with regards to type white. To
Yeah.
be clear, type
Yeah.
white. It was the perception here in the South of type 1 diabetes, and that is not the case, right? It is a equal opportunity attacker. Um, and the perception and the mindset of the provider was that no, 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 you're a type 2 diabetic. This should probably be diet and exercise, when in fact, no, your body's not making insulin at all.
Right. I'm very fortunate that, my provider did not go straight to type 2, especially
Mm,
because of my age. But being in the environment, I've seen that happen countless times to a lot of people. But that's why it's so important that, we get the full background. We see what the biomarkers are, what everything looks like, because, one thing can change a whole situation.
yeah. And I think that brings into account, as you said before, why it's so important for a patient to share their voice and to speak up. So many times patients, may look at their provider as a parental like figure where, oh, I can't challenge them or I can't ask questions,
Please do.
because you don't want to feel stupid. How did you yourself, obviously mom was a big help, how have you learned to overcome that and speak for yourself?
It definitely took years of practice, and I'm glad I got practice at a young age, because the more that I did it, and especially the more that I was involved on these type of levels, especially dealing with policy, it really made me put things into perspective to say, you know what, if I can do this for other patients, there's no reason why I cannot do this for myself. And it
Sure.
wasn't until I got into college that if I didn't feel that a provider was a good fit, I would just say, like, okay, I think I need to switch. And I
Yeah.
would look for someone else until I found someone who was able to fit my needs. But that took a lot of practice, and it took a lot of self examination to see what
Mm,
exactly is it that I need. And I think a lot of times we go into situations when we really don't know what we need yet. So we don't know what to ask for. So something
sure.
that for me is just one, having a really great support system, and not only allies but person that were living with my condition, but also really doing that self-examination and asking what is going to make me the healthiest and the happiest, and who is able to give that to me, and is that here, or do I need to even look to another part of the state, which
Mm,
I had to do a few times, especially when I was younger, because this area in Southeast North Carolina didn't have any pediatric endocrinologist. And to this day, this has almost been 20 years later, we only have one. So,
Wow. So you, as we were talking about with an advocate earlier in the week, sometimes you got to vote with your feet. May that be in politics or that be in medicine. And
oh, yeah,
you did what was right for you by going somewhere else, right?
yes, absolutely.
How did you find those providers for yourself? What did that work look like?
A lot of trial and error, and then also just asking around, and also
Mm,
remembering that, especially with these patient advocacy groups that we're working in, a lot of times we're working with these providers, we just see them in a different light. So, for example, whether that's breakthrough T1D
hmm
or the DAC, we have providers that are there. When I meet with them, they're more like council members, but lo and behold, after everything is done, they're still a healthcare provider. So using those as a resource instead of
Yeah.
just kind of doing your job and getting off the phone, it's really helpful.
I applaud you for not just doing the work for you, but then for turning around and doing that same work for others. How did you get into advocacy itself and realize that your voice can be used for more?
Honestly, I really don't think I even noticed it was advocacy when I started,
Of course.
because I was just someone who enjoyed writing. And when I was younger, I loved speech writing
Mm,
because I enjoyed doing debate. I enjoyed like learning about civic engagement and policy. And then I just thought, like, okay, I'm doing the research part of this stuff, but is there any connection to patient advocacy groups or policy with clinical research? And the more I dug into it, the more that I just found more and more resources. But if I really go back to when advocacy started, I have to say it started in the classroom when I
mm,
was 8 years old, because my mom would give me a script and it was how to talk to my teachers and what to
wow.
tell them my disease was, what devices I used, what to look out for in case an emergency happened, or if I started like passing out or, started zoning out in class, what was really going on. And then the more I did that, I remember when I got to middle school, there was actually another person with diabetes, and it was the first time I had been in a area or a school where there were I was not the
You
only
weren't the only
person.
one? Yeah.
Right. But also, not only being the only one, but there were two other Black girls who had it, which
Who
was
had
super
type 1?
exciting to me. Yes. And it's like we just kind of clung together. One was a grade ahead of me and one was a grade under me. And
Sure.
I remember, especially for the one that was under me, she would come in, but how I was prepped and like getting everything done, it was the complete opposite. So I found myself like coming to the nurse's office
Advocating for her?
pretty much like, hey, did you do this today? Did you do this? And of course, we're in middle school. So she's like sick of it already. Like, yes, I did it. Okay. But
Thanks,
it was like a
Mom.
sibling relationship anyway. So it was great.
That's fantastic. Now, you've been doing individual and independent patient advocacy, you've been doing policy work, and you also find yourself in industry. Um,
Yeah.
Tell me more about your work in the industry. And let's be honest and frank here. The industry has been doing advocacy for a long time. They've been doing issues and policy advocacy. They've been doing disease state work in a non branded fashion.
Yeah.
But sometimes, and most of the time, they still have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah.
What
It's true.
have you seen, and what's been your experience in advocacy in the industry?
One thing I've noticed, and I will start off like sandwich, is that I'm glad that it's at least being done and that it's
Sure.
being addressed and that there are resources being put to it. Where I see improvements could be made is that a lot of times there's not enough patient interaction. And
Mm,
what I'm saying is there are those of us who have the disease, who have the education, who have the interest to support and to advocate, but we're not always in these rooms. We're not always
yes.
holding these roles. So what's being produced is by someone who may not have any direct interaction with the disease or the ailment at hand, and it's not always hitting everything on the head that we need it to,
Yeah.
and we need it. So what I would say for industry, from what I've seen, is that including the patient externally is one piece, but we also need to look to include them internally, whether
Mm.
that be through our EBRGs or different
What's that
initiatives.
acronym? I'm sorry.
Employee resource groups.
There you go.
So used to acronyms.
No worry. Yeah, that's the industry for you, right? Is
Oh
acronym
my
heavy.
goodness, so many acronyms. So just finding ways to make sure we are tapping the resources that are at our fingertips and are actually within our reach within our companies, I think we will see a load of difference.
And let's go a little bit deeper because I'm sure there are plenty of listeners who don't even know that pharma and biotech companies do any work outside of their products, right?
Oh yeah.
So it's one thing to hear it from me, but to hear from you, what type of work a pharma or biotech company actually does to help patients.
Sure. So a lot of times what we don't know, and especially when we're coming into the advocacy space, a lot of times we think that just means going to the Hill, talking to policymakers, talking to your doctors. There are patient advocacy roles within the pharma and the drug development spaces. And
Sure.
what these do is they make sure that you're able to get the medications that you need, the devices that you need. And they actually have patient advocacy hotlines to help you advocate for yourself. Maybe it's to a healthcare provider, but then also if you are experiencing insecurity or
Mm.
you are experiencing a life change that, you didn't expect and you need to make sure you get your ultra expensive medication, they're there to help you. So another part of the advocacy piece is that the provider piece,
Yeah.
providing information that people know where to go and know how to get these resources, but also being able to provide those resources. And that's what a lot of the those of us who are on the pharma side and
Hmm.
focused on that area, that's what we provide to people. And then also just partnerships with the different patient advocacy groups. So sometimes it may not be direct consumer advocacy, but we're giving the resources to the advocacy groups to make sure patients are taken care of.
As we try to tell industry all the time, listen, you may not have the trust of the patient community, but that doesn't mean you stop, right? There are plenty of organizations out there that do have the trust of the patient community, as you referenced, the disease state nonprofits, the Beyond Type 1s, as you referenced, which was Juvenile Diabetes Foundation. They have the trust of the patients, but they don't oftentimes have the funds or the knowledge sometimes, especially in policy advocacy, to do some of the things that patients need. And that's where industry can really step in and help.
Absolutely. I think that not only through funding, but then also through partnership. So encourage and engage with your employees to allow them to advocate, to be with the patients, to not just go when we need something, like we've seen in past events that have not been so far away,
Sure.
to actually engage with them
Were
on,
you there?
yeah, no, not,
So
not at that one.
okay. Okay.
Unfortunately, I think I was supposed to be, but I was not there, unfortunately.
And for those of you who are wondering what is the secret conversation that we're having, uh, ultimately I was an attendee at the American Diabetes Association's annual conference, and it's a wonderful conference that's put on that does a lot of educating of both the industry itself and of patients on all that's taking place in innovation and new things that are coming, but also the day to day lives of patients with diabetes. And unfortunately, there was a shenanigan, let's call it that, that took place in which a couple of the key scientists for the ADA were kicked out of their own meeting because of a political stance that they took during the meeting, in which someone from the CDC or CMS was in attendance to speak. And all that they were doing was handing out a flyer, calling attention to an article that they had published in the ADA's own magazine. So this was something that had been approved and published by the ADA. They were handing that out at that time. The ADA knew about this weeks in advance, and they still chose to have those individuals arrested and removed from the meeting. It caused a massive uproar, still is having fallout as we speak. But nonetheless, that's not detract from the importance of a meeting like that in an organization like the ADA, in which it has done such amazing work for the patient population as a whole, especially those with diabetes, both type 1, type 2, and now moving into just the obesity space as well. But that's where obviously we had a number of folks from industry in attendance. As you think back in the work that you've done in industry, where do you see organizations like that and their opportunities to engage with patients when, as I referenced, you might not have the trust of the community that you're going into?
Right. I think from what I've seen, especially with the ADA, because I've actually been able to participate even when I was working on that side of things, is that they actually have councils and they have boards for persons with diabetes.
Mm.
So being able to be there and to give your perspective of what it's like and what you would like to see research on and what you think there needs to be a focus on, and actually give them to leadership directly, I think those are super helpful, because not only are you sharing information with one organization, we're able to share information across the industry as a whole. And the sharing of information is going to create diversity of thought, and diversity of thought is going to create innovation. And
Yes.
that's what's going to help us get to the next area where we need in disease advancement and therapy advancement to make things a lot better for patients.
Yeah. Could not agree more. As you referenced, and this is something that if I go all the way back to one of our first episodes with Brandon Moxada out of the HIV/AIDS community, nothing about us without us, right?
Exactly.
And we hear so many patient communities trying to get those same words out, but I think it's so simply and eloquently and impactfully put. That's really the standard. That should be the standard. But to put a little bit of pressure on the industry, it's something that if you're in advocacy, you recognize. If you've never been in advocacy, the common phrase is, if you've never been in advocacy, there's no amount of slides that will tell you its impact. If you've been in advocacy, none are necessary, right? So with that comes changes in the roles and the size of teams and the budgeting. What do you feel that industry executives need to really understand about that advocacy function?
Honestly, I think that advocacy is not something that is always taught. It is
Mm-hmm.
something that's felt. And you have to really have that heart to advocate effectively. Because a lot of times, if we have our degrees, super helpful,
Yeah,
but you cannot get a degree in diabetes. You can't get a degree in rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, you can, but it won't be the patient degree. That's a
exactly.
degree on its own. So to be able to advocate from personal experience, from lived experience, whether it's as an ally or a patient, that's something that's not made onto slides, and it's not
Yeah.
something that's taught in a handbook or a textbook. And I think the more communication that we have, and rather than just having a story of something that we've heard, but actually having those people there at the table to explain the importance of this, that's where it lies. Rather than, we can take trainings all day and it'll be great.
Yes.
What would be even better is to take a training, but then have a panel, see who your
Yeah.
colleagues are who are affected. How does this affect their workday? How can we support them as employers, as leadership, even as coworkers? Because that changes the the conversation. Not only are you showing support, but now most likely you're going to be engaged even more to say, wait a minute, my colleague is affected by this. I want to learn more about this. I'm able to advocate on a different level because I know so much more than I would if I was just given a slide deck.
Yes. Yep. And that's going back to, as you referenced in policy too, there's one way you can go about trying to explain what a patient feels or tell stories that you've heard, but there's nothing that replaces that patient giving their own testimony, their own story.
If anything, I think it's the very opposite. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's patients have their stories and they're able to add in the data. That is something that really sticks heavily. I can be completely relatable on that because
Yeah.
I one of my best approaches that I always try to adhere to when I'm advocating policy is I tell my story, but then I also tie in to put in perspective. If we're thinking about one state, this is costing us $406 billion or $1 million a
Wow.
year.
Yeah.
Just take that amount of money and think about everything else we could be doing if we were healthy. And here's how you can help us do the things that we need to so that we remain healthy and that we're able to live high quality of life lives as patients.
Yes. Yep. And I mean, if we think about the amount of money that's spent, for example, on commercials, right, in the pharmaceutical space, just imagine if we took that and based off the market research that I run, if you were to take the 18% of the average budget that is spent on commercials and take the patient advocacy budget, which is usually about 1.3 to 1.6% of an annual budget, and just flip the two, imagine the differences that we'd see.
Oh, it would be phenomenal. I
It
mean,
would be life changing for
astronomical.
patients.
Absolutely. And most importantly, with that, it would give an opportunity for the patient to actually feel seen. Because a lot of times, even with pharma and different areas of healthcare, they're starting to do narratives. They're starting to do patient groups where they come and they actually talk about their experiences. But the flip side of that we're running into is that not everyone knows it's available. They don't
Mm,
know how to even get involved. They don't know that you can go and talk about your life with diabetes to diabetes advocacy companies or to
yeah.
diabetes pharma companies, or talk about your experience living as a student with
Mm,
rheumatoid or a student athlete and how
yeah.
that affects everything. So I think just letting them know we want to hear from you
Yeah.
and to show that we want to hear from you, that's really what's going to make things different.
What's interesting is I remember an anecdote, and this is not to fly in the face of what I said about, having the patients tell their story, but I just love this story in the rheumatoid arthritis space in which a company was bringing a product to market and it was going to be an auto injectable pen, right? And they opted to bring patients in at the 11th hour, um, to just get some feedback, not even the development phase, not in early research to try to figure out what patients needed or figure out what their lives are like. No, no, no. Feedback on the naming and the colors of the pens and those sorts of things. They were launching this product in about a couple of weeks. And when they brought this group together, it was then and then only that they realized that the amount of pressure it took to activate the pen was too much for patients with rheumatoid arthritis. And just think about the billions of dollars that were wasted because they didn't engage patients early in that process. Right? And it sounds laughable, but it's almost industry standard at this point. I would say that the majority of companies that I work with, if you leave the advocacy function and you go to marketing or you go to market access or you go to policy, they may not even be aware that there is an advocacy team,
Yes, I've seen that a lot,
right?
especially.
And see, And a lot of it's due to the fact that the legal folks that be within those companies try to keep advocacy in a silo, right? There's this weird way that we treat advocacy because you're dealing with patients and we can't have you talk about our products, which you're not, right? But why is it that we can't share the patient's story outside of a feel good Friday? It's so frustrating.
Just like you were saying, it's also a thing of morale as well. If we're looking at employees,
Mm-hmm.
all day that you're working in research, you're working behind the scenes of different studies, of different innovations, it's very easy to forget, why am I here? And the real reason
Yes.
we're all here is because of the patient. So to have that patient voice, whether that
Yeah.
written form, whether that be audio, whatever that looks like, it's impactful because that's the reminder. This is what we're working for. I mean, of course, we're getting paid, we're getting
Yeah.
everything, we're getting visibility, but it's all going to be affecting someone's life. And I
Yep.
just think that from a perspective, because I didn't really get to work on the diabetes side within industry, but the therapeutic area that I worked in, this is affecting someone's family. And I would
Yeah.
just think it's my own experience to say, oh my goodness, what if one of the diabetes companies stopped making formulas for insulin? I
Yeah.
am in trouble. And I just have that perspective and think of it for what I'm working on, to say
Yes.
that, you know what, someone else is feeling this way for their parent, for their
Yep.
child, for whoever it is.
And I would add, you bring up a great point, which is the care partners
Oh, yeah.
of the patient, right? And how important it is to make sure that voice is at the table too. Tell us a little bit about maybe where had the opportunity to work both with patients, but maybe even the care partners as well.
Sure. So I've had the opportunity to do that on a lot of different scales. One of my first ones was when I was on campus at UNCW,
Mm.
University of North Carolina, Wilmington. We started
Woo-hoo.
a chapter, go Seahawks. We started a chapter of the diabetes. At the time, it was the College Diabetes Network. Now
Hmm.
it's the Diabetes Link, but our name for our club was Dubs for Diabetes, hence play on UNCW and
Yeah.
diabetes. And what we did is we opened it to students who were living with diabetes, especially type 1, but we also expanded it to the allies. So we started reaching out to the health science organizations, to the nursing departments, clinical research, and all of these other areas. And then we expanded it, beyond that. So then significant others started coming, parents started coming, our professors who were living with it or had a spouse or a child or a parent living with it, they started coming. So what it ended up being was a huge support group, not only for patients, but for allies, and they could hear how we think of different perspectives. Perfect example, I remember there was one time, and I'm glad she asked me this, but I had a friend, well, we were advocating, and she became a
Yeah.
friend, and she was telling me about her significant other and how he was the one who had diabetes. However, she couldn't understand his annoyance when she was just trying to help in different ways. And I was
Yeah.
able to give a perspective. I'm like, okay, well, here is how it looks for a person with diabetes. And here's how it
Sure.
feels different compared to a person who's healthy. So, working with allies and caregivers and having that literal allyship is all
Yeah.
about conversation and seeing not only how does it feel from our perspective, but how can we support you? And one of those biggest things for me is making sure allies know who their allies are. So, who are the other caregivers in the group? How can you lean on one another? And
Yeah.
how can you just get a break for
Yes.
years? I mean, you cannot get the mental break, especially
Yeah.
I've seen it with, parents, and I have
Yep.
not been there yet. I cannot relate. I am not a parent.
Yep.
But one thing I do know, once you have a chronically ill kid, they're
Yeah.
always going to be on your mind. So I try to make it so I'm like, I'm not doing anything crazy,
Yeah.
but even if you do or you don't, it's always going to be in the mind of a caregiver. So also giving that
Always.
grace.
That's fantastic. And yes, the mental break, or at least, as you said even earlier, with regards to yourself as a patient, to know that you're not the only one, right? It's such
Right.
a even for me, when I was going through 18 years of opiates and feeling like I was at the end and there was no one that can there be that there's even possible to help me, to know that I wasn't the only one meant the world to me. And to find those people, it shouldn't be so difficult, but sometimes it is. Um,
Yeah. One thing
Go
I
ahead.
can add to that is what we have to remember is you are not always going to find your people or support group in the doctor's office.
That's
It's
right.
not going to be in a patient advocacy group sometimes. It might not even be in a classroom, but it can be in so many other places that you probably wouldn't think of. Perfect example, I call her my diabestie, but we were actually doing, lo and behold, we were doing a patient advocacy group event when we were in high school, and that's how we met. But when we went to college, we both did Greek life, and that's something that made us closer. So
Wow.
sometimes it's looking in different organizations that actually have nothing to do with your disease or advocacy or anything in the mix, and
Yeah.
finding your support and finding people who can relate to you, who may not always be talking about it, but
Yeah.
you know, you have something in common.
What I love so much about what you're saying, and really what it comes down to, is your disease does not define you.
Absolutely. It is a word, not a sentence.
Oh, I love that. It is a word, not a sentence. So, so, so true. Because when we get that diagnosis, whatever it is, it feels like it eats us. That it becomes who we are, when that's not the case,
Absolutely. And there are
right?
so many things, a lot of times we don't even think about it when we're diagnosed, but there are good things that can come
Hmm.
out of it. I always say, like the friends I have now, I probably would not be talking to you all if I did not have this disease. And
Sure.
that, we don't like each other, but it's a thing, we probably wouldn't be in the same spaces. We wouldn't know each
Yes.
other.
Yep.
Or even finding your passion. I wouldn't probably think about diabetes as something that I'm passionate about if I hadn't been diagnosed so long, and seeing the evolution and seeing those around me affected, not only, my friends who have it or my family who has it, but then also the caregivers who have it. Because, I mean, I think my mom's perspective is completely different than my perspective, completely different
Yes.
than a different patient's, especially, or than a different caregiver's. One reason being is because she was a single mom and she was
Mm.
raising me. So not only do you have to deal with the disease itself, but then you have to deal with the statistics. You have to deal with the stigma. You have to deal with making sure they are just a kid. So a
Yes.
lot that goes into it. And I think that's
Yeah.
another thing, like you were saying, is the disease isn't just us, especially when you're diagnosed younger. We have to remember we are still kids.
You're still
And
kids. Yeah.
even if you're diagnosed in your 20s, like, listen, you're still going to have fun. Like,
You're still a young
there's
adult.
exactly, there's still things for you to do. Like, your life isn't gonna end there. Like, the world is gonna keep on turning. You can turn with
Yeah.
it, or you can just let it pass.
That's an unbelievable statement. It brings back for me a question I had for you, which was, how did you find the advocacy organizations that may have been out there to support you?
Honestly, I'm glad I started early because I feel like it's almost like a running joke, but JDRF or Breakthrough T1D now, it was everyone's launch pad into
Hmm.
advocacy and to getting things done. But for me, I just came to a day when I was in undergrad, I was about to graduate, and I said, I want to get into advocacy. So I went onto Google and I just typed in diabetes patient advocacy groups, and I went to almost every link and signed up. And I said, I don't know what this means. I don't know what's going to stick, but I will see what
Yeah.
happens. And the first one that came back was the Diabetes Patient Advocacy Council. And it's funny because it was almost like a perfect storm, because a few months later, COVID hit. And
Wow.
when COVID hit, that was completely different, because my worry was that, okay, I have diabetes. I'm also trying to do school. I'm trying to work and intern. I have all this stuff on my plate. I can't just drop everything, pick up and go to DC or Raleigh or wherever our conference
Yeah.
is or wherever we're advocating because I have so much on my plate. But because of COVID, we were able to do everything virtually for that year. So that's how I got to start practicing. Well, I was actually doing it, but I feel like it was practicing before I went in person, which I eventually
Sure.
did. And I was able, to lead my state. And it was just so exciting because
Yeah.
you see how everyone is thinking about things, how everyone is pretty much on the same playing field to say, we're here to advocate for this. These are our 3 or 4 asks, and that we're here to share our stories.
Yeah.
And being able to do that with people who I've grown to work really closely with, it was one of the most exciting experiences I've ever had.
I love it. I love it. So, Shay, thus far, you've told us a lot about your past, about tackling type 1 diabetes and rheumatoid arthritis. And you've done so with grace, and the passion has just built to ensure that you're not leaving anyone behind, that you're able to pull your community up, and you continue to do that work as the co-chair of the T1D Trends and Needs Working Group there in North Carolina, part of the North Carolina Diabetes Advisory Council. You just finished your PhD, right?
Yeah.
Which is an unbelievable thing. I'm sure that's a breath of fresh air for you. I know you got to get till what, August, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes. Officially August, I will have my Doctor of Health Science degree.
There we
And
go.
I've focused in on interprofessional education for this reason exactly.
So you are lined up perfectly for all of our listeners from industry. I could not recommend a better advocate who not only understands the power of patient advocacy, but can do the work and knows how the work needs to be done and can represent that back to leadership, which is a shortcoming, I would say, for most organizations that I've worked with over the last 12 years. So Shay, if you are looking at the industry right now, what are some of your must-haves as you think about the companies that you're looking at joining today?
Definitely. You must have a desire to improve patient life.
Mm.
That is the foundation of everything that we are looking at. Everything else is important, but the patient is the end game. And what does that look like? That looks like improving that communication. That looks like thinking outside of the box. How are
Mm.
we representing the multicultural, the underserved
Mm-hmm.
patients, those who are not seen in the data? How are we getting their perspectives? How are we getting the data that we need from their end so that we can produce products that we are able to give them to help improve their health? Because if
And
we
can
look,
actually say it will work for them, right?
yes, because if we look historically, there's not a lot of data on underrepresented communities. When we're
Let's be
looking at
honest, Shay. Let's be
there's
honest. 90% of clinical trials of participants or more
oh yeah,
look like me,
absolutely. It's the
right?
truth.
And that's not general population.
No, not at all. Not at all. When it comes to women, when it comes to people of color, especially when it comes to African Americans, we are historically underrepresented,
Yes.
especially if we're looking at pregnant women. And
Yeah.
that is super important. For
Which
example,
is
if we
why
were
we have the issues that we have, right? With African American women
exactly.
and pregnancy and still leading, I would say almost, if you're in the United States,
Mhm,
maternal health should not be a problem, but it still is
exactly.
a major problem for African
It's
American
huge.
women, correct?
It is huge. And it's to the point I actually have a really good friend, and she did her capstone on maternal health because she had a really bad experience. And
Wow.
it's not to say like it's socioeconomic or education, it's across
Hmm.
the board. And it affects everyone, especially the Black community. Black
Hmm.
women have such a higher chance of having some type of complication or even just death from
Yeah.
childbirth, and that
Yep.
shouldn't be the case. We
Not
have
in 2026.
too much technology in 2026.
Yeah. So as you look towards your future, you know, you have an unbelievable amount of experience. You've got some great education, and you're still doing the work of advocacy
Oh
on a
yeah,
day-to-day basis and policy, which is such a, in my opinion, a rare breed
yeah.
because there are so many folks that I work with in the industry that know advocacy but don't know policy, or know
Mhm.
policy but don't know advocacy. And to
Yeah,
do both well, you have to understand both, right? So
absolutely.
as you look towards the industry, obviously it's not just those that say they want to do what's right for the patient, it's those that actually do, right? I think every company will say, we are patient centric. Of course you are, to an extent, right? And there's a difference. Shoshana Lipson, who's a patient advocate in the migraine space and chronic pain world, has said, listen, you're patient centric when a patient says you are, not when you say you are, right?
Exactly.
So if you were to land at a company tomorrow, what are some of the tactics that you think you need to establish very quickly to make sure that that is a function that is going to have lasting impact?
I think we need to establish talk spaces and safe spaces within the communities.
Mm,
We've done that somewhat within our own communities, within the industry, where we're able to talk as employees, but we need to take that energy and we need to share it with the patients. We need to go out into the different, non advocacy groups.
yeah.
If we're looking at the Black community, we need to be connecting with the Divine Nine and the Black Greeks. We need to be connecting with the churches. We need to be connecting with the different HBCUs and educational institutions, because if we continue to go in the same traditional ways, we're going to get the same results. So I think that we need to be creative and give them a place that they will enjoy coming to, and that they will feel seen. They will feel like we as the industry, we're not just a resource, but we're actually
Yeah.
part of the community.
Mm.
So
And
understand.
we're not going to show up when we need something.
Exactly, exactly. If we're already there,
Yeah.
well, we're not coming just
Yeah.
because we want something, because we've been here.
That's right.
It's almost like, coming home. It's not
Yeah.
like you're going to your friend's house and saying, hey, could I get dinner? You're coming
Yeah.
home. So of course you're going
Yes.
to get dinner. Like, you're
That's right.
already here.
Yeah.
So that's what we really need. We need to establish those hubs within the community. And my biggest thing that I think is very important is we need to bring the resources to the community rather than send the community to the resources.
Ooh.
Perfect example that I've experienced a couple years ago was at my state convention for the I think it was the State Baptist Convention down
Mm-hmm.
in Wilmington. And one of the things they did is they incorporated a portion about clinical trials and organ donation within the conference
Wow.
during the worship service.
Brilliant.
These are the times that we need to do that, when we are engaged. Now, of course, there's a time and place for everything,
Yeah.
but send someone when you have our attention. We want to know the options that are open for us.
Yeah.
But if we're saying, like, hey, there's a flyer in the lobby, go pick it up and you can go to such and such place, that's not always the way to do it.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I would definitely bring in a new and a fresh perspective of how we can attract more data, but
Yep.
we fix that, more patients, because
Mm.
that is the another issue that we see within the patient community. We're seen as data. We're seen as numbers. And I honestly, my capstone was named Beyond Glucose. I'm actually looking at it, but I almost named it More Than Numbers, because we are more than just
Yeah.
numbers. So I think making sure that we are articulating things in the way that patients understand, but then also acknowledging who are the people on our teams, whether that's in the patient advocacy team, whether that's in operations, how can they connect with this community? And it's not to say, we're cherry picking, but I would more so talk to someone who can connect with me rather than someone random, and they
Yes.
don't always understand the culture of the community or how we do things, and they look uncomfortable, and then that's a whole
Yep.
different situation we have to fix.
When you have to spend more time explaining yourself than actually talking about the problem, there's not a benefit there,
Not at
right?
all.
And I would say in my experience in working with industry, like you talked about, coming home, industry has never set up home within communities of color or within minority communities in general. And that's why it's oftentimes such a battle to get people to see the value of clinical research or to be part of a clinical trial. It's one thing to say, listen, at some point a clinical trial is considered standard of care, especially in the oncology space. It's another to get people to actually believe it when their community has been used and abused in the clinical research space. So it takes showing up and living there and doing that hard work and having those difficult conversations.
One thing that I always say, and it's been my mantra since college, in order to represent patients on the patient end, we have to start at the student end. So when we're looking at our STEM careers, we're looking at clinical research majors, we really need to pack in those classrooms, especially if we're talking about the curriculum and what they're being taught. Cultural competency is absolutely, absolutely crucial. You have to explain that, and not just in a chapter or two. There should be some way to actually practice that within the community and it be a requirement. Because
Wow.
once we have students who then become professionals and increase professional representation, then of course we can expect patient representation because they see themselves working in it and they have that trust that my community is not going to harm me.
Yes. See, and Shay, I want to leave it there because that is such a pivotal statement. What I love about you is that you're not afraid to think outside the box. You're not afraid to see the big picture and see where we've been, but where we can go if we're willing to do the work. And you've done it, you've proven it, you've shown it time and time again that it can be done. It can be done exceptionally well. As we a call yesterday with someone who had said, I want everyone to have access. No, I don't want everyone to have access. I want everyone to have excellent access to excellent care, right? That should be the standard. And what I'm hearing from you is exactly the same, is setting those standards, but also doing that hard work of let's not wait until they're adults. Let's go into the curriculum. Let's ensure that we are supporting individuals in their own journeys to ensure that they can support their communities.
Exactly. We're not looking at equality, we are looking at equity.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
it cannot have patient advocacy without patient equity, because not every patient is going to need the same thing. For example,
Yes.
you could give a patient a course on patient advocacy, completely help them. You give me the course, I'd probably teach it. Maybe.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. See, and that's, in the industry, we've seen so many people run away from
Oh, yeah.
diversity and health equity with the new administration. It's not like it's been fixed
Nope.
by any means, right? And I don't care if you got to rename it. We as an organization renamed it. We continue to do the work. Okay, so we can't say DEI. All right, we renamed it RISE, which is reach, include, support, and educate. Because at the end of the day, it's exactly the same thing that we were doing under a different name, right? We have to have diverse voices and faces in the room to share their stories and feedback to know how we all get better.
Exactly. If we don't have diversity of thought, we have inclusion of thought, which we want inclusion, but we have stagnation of ideas.
Amen. Amen. Stagnation of ideas. I love it. Shay, this is why I added you to the board for the Advocate Bridge to ensure that
Yes.
we do not have stagnation of ideas. And yes, people, I saw her light and the value that she could add and jumped all over it. So if you are part of a pharmaceutical organization or biotech company that's looking to add a bright light into your advocacy and true clinical excellence, look no further than Shay. Shay, my last question for you before I let you go. If you could go back, not too long ago, but if you could go back to, well, let's flip it up. I usually ask when they're 20, but if we could go back to when you were 10 years old, 2 years out after being diagnosed, what would you have told that little girl at that point?
Wow. Honestly, this is going to sound very interesting, but I would definitely tell her to keep her head up.
Mm.
And it's funny because I probably would have said, you know, listen to mommy. because the things that my mom said did come to pass. Like
Damn.
every time, I know every time it's like magic or something. But
Well,
it's
hey,
like,
you said you don't have kids yet, but you got good
I
education for when you
know.
do.
No, oh my gosh. It's crazy when what she was talking about with diabetes technology, when
Yeah.
it came to the advancements, when it came to seeing more people that look like me, she's like, they're going to come. Just give it time. And I did. And I just look at now, and I would have never believed this when I was 8 years old, or even
Yeah.
just like the degrees that I've done, the areas that I've done in them, I would have never believed it because
Sure.
I was a person I didn't think I liked science. And it was because I wasn't around people who really explained the depth of what that looked like. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I like research and I like, health and nutrition.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that that was science until I got to high school. And it was actually my NAACP president. She's like, oh, well, that's STEM. So you're going to compete here. And I'm like, I didn't know that. So I was doing it the
Wow.
entire time, didn't know it.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that is that I would definitely, I, honestly, there's so many things I probably would tell her because there are so many things coming down the pipeline. Like
Mm,
one day you're not going to have to pick up a insulin pen or a syringe. You're going to do
yeah.
this from your phone. And yes, you will get an iPhone. You will, I'm sure, very badly, but you will get that. And then also, you know, one thing I always say, especially when it comes to advocacy, behind every successful and passionate advocate was once that kid or that teenager who wanted to rebel out against diabetes who was completely burned out.
Yeah.
And like it was just spiraling. And I would definitely embrace that and
Yeah.
learn it. Be safe, but understand that the experience you're going through now is going to be a testimony for someone in 10 years, in 5 years, in 20 years. Okay, we haven't gotten to the 20 yet. We're almost there. But like, there's a reason why you're
Yeah.
going through it. And I would really encourage her to write down everything she is feeling so she could show it to another 10-year-old in 10
Yeah.
years and let her understand, like, I understand what you're going through because I was there and
Yeah.
I've seen it. And
Yep.
there are so many people rooting for you. And she knew that. But, to the death that I see it now, it's just completely different. So I will
I
definitely say
love it.
I'm proud of her.
Oh, that's there you go. I'm proud of you too, Shay. I really am. The work that you've done, the fight that you have gone through from 8 years old on in a society that didn't want to see you as a a type 1 diabetic, wanted to isolate you as type 2, but then also the fight that you are mounting on behalf of patients all over this country, especially in North Carolina. It's a testament to the strength that your parents instilled in you, your mom, and the education that she pushed on you, but also your willingness to listen and really truly embrace listening, not just listen to hear what you can respond with.
Exactly. I always tell people I feel like, one, I couldn't have gotten here without the grace of God. No
Yes.
way possible. Like, Jesus Christ is my savior.
Yep.
But I feel like this is another version of ministry that you
Yeah.
can do beyond the four walls. And it's something I would have never imagined doing. I would have never seen myself as an advocate of this magnitude when I was younger, to the point where it's like, oh, yeah, you do advocacy. And I'm like, how do you know what I do? And one, how do you know my name? And how
See?
do you learn it?
Yep. I'm a big believer that God puts people in our lives for a reason, and I know He put us together because we are on the same mission. We're creating disciples just in a different way, and we are ensuring that everyone has the best life that they can. The other statement I live my life on is your mess becomes your message, right?
Yes.
And it's so true for me, it's true for you. And now we are using those messages to empower others, to change companies, to shape the way that business gets done, but most importantly, ensure that that patient voice is respected and utilized.
Exactly. I mean, when it comes to diagnosis, I always live by every curse and bad situation has a silver lining,
Yep.
which is insane, but there is always something that's going to come out of it.
That's right. He will always use it for his glory, right?
Amen.
That's right. Well, Shay, it's been an absolute privilege. I appreciate your time today, and we'll continue to keep the word out, and you'll see all of the wonderful clips of this episode. So please share it with your friends and followers, and we look forward to keeping in touch and continuing to build some amazing tools for patients.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me, Matt.
Thank you.